Hey everybody, Lars here. Time for the beginning of Unit 2. This is the first review video for the second unit of the Python for Data Science class. Should be a quick one. I know I always say that, but hopefully this will be a decent one where we're just going to run over some examples with strings, and then we're going to run over some examples with lists. And then if there's time at the end, I'm going to show you a little weirdness with the way Python handles strings, but it kind of makes sense if you think about it, but we'll run through all of that stuff when we get there. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to bring up a piece of code that I already have written for us. Don't want that beginning section. I want this top section on the strings. And then, hold on a second, let me run it. Yay, there we go. And put that over here so we can look at the results as we run through some of this code. Okay. First thing we're going to do in this little piece of code is we're going to define a string, and I just call the variable myString, and I make it equal to the sentence, "The rain in Spain falls mainly on the plain," from, I don't know, Pygmalion, or Dr. Dolittle, you might know it from. So we have that string. It has 43 characters, but we're going to see we go from 0 to 42. So the first thing we're going to do is down here we're going to print, and then we're going to run the len function on my string, and over here we're going to see that there are indeed 43 characters. But we've got to remember that we're computer scientists now, so we start counting with 0. So as well, you know what, I'll do it down here. As you can see, access the characters with an index. I print my string of 5, and you can see an A is printed. So you might say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh, okay, that's it. The A is in the 5 spot, but that's not what's going on. What's going on is that we start counting at 0, and spaces count. They're legitimate characters. A space is a legit character. So when I look at this string and I want to print the 5th item in the string, I go 0, 1, 2, 3, the space counts, 4, 5, and that's how I arrive at the A right there. So we can take a string and go grab individual characters in it using indexing. As you can see below it, there's an example of what we call slicing. You can grab a subsection or substring from the bigger string. A lot of other languages call it substring. I think it's substring in Java. But as we're going to learn going forward, you're going to hear me say it a lot, there's a rub to the way this interval is done. You see, we start with 5, so I want to start with the 5th character, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the A, and as I come over here to where it's been printed out, you can see that's where it starts. It starts with the A. But as I move forward and I get to 15, 15 is the I, but we don't print it because when we do intervals and we do ranges in Python, the second item is the first thing that we don't want. It's exclusive. So the beginning of the range is inclusive. That's the first thing we get. And then this is the first thing we don't want. So what you're really getting is a substring that starts at 5 and ends at 14. And if you count them up, you'll see that that's what this is right here. The A is the 14th item in that particular string. So keep that in mind because you're going to be wanting to grab a substring, and you're going to want to make sure that you get the right pieces, the pieces that you want. This comes in handy, I know, with video game programming, because sometimes you'll have a really long string with a whole bunch of items and a whole bunch of strings in it, and you want to just go grab pieces of it for different situations. So that's when you might use slicing, and you might go grab a piece of it. And you've got to remember the back end of that range is the first thing that you don't want. And believe me, you're going to hear me say that. I'm going to be a broken record on that one. Out of bounds error. You can see print my string of 42, and over here it prints the N, which is the last item. But we have 43 items, so we have to remember that we start counting with 0. Now, if I requested the 43rd item in the string, I'm going to rerun, you'll see that it breaks. You'll see that we get an error. And the reason we get an error is string index out of range. Basically, Python is telling us, hey, you've got 43 characters, and you just asked me for the 44th one, because I start with 0, so 43 is really asking for the 44th character. I can't do that for you. That's actually pretty good. because when you start to learn more about computer programming, you'll learn that a language that a lot of computer programmers know is C. And in C would let you do that, because if you ask for a certain memory space, C is just going to give it to you. Okay, it's not going to tell you that, hey, you know what, this string doesn't really have that. It's going to start at the beginning, go 44 spaces over, and give you what's in that 44th space. So it's actually a good thing that we do that. I'm going to reset that back to something that works, and everything is good. Let's bring this up here so we can still do our comparison on the screen, okay? So that's an out-of-bounds error. You got to make sure if you're going to reference little subparts of your string that you're within, you know, the bounds of that string. We can also do index math. As you can see, 4 plus 5 is 9, 12 minus 3 is 9, and it gives us the same result here, the I. I guess the I is what, right there? That one? Yeah. So there may be a time, again, with my gaming example, where you want to do math on the index in order to go to the right spot. If you know you have 10 strings and they're all within 170 character string, and you just have you have 10 different 7-character strings that you want to grab, well, then you could use multiplication and grab the third one by saying, you know, 3 times 7 for the index or whatever. So you can do index math. That's, you know, perfectly legal in Python. You can also use variables in there if you'd like. You don't have to use the hard-coded numbers. So that also comes in handy and is a good thing to remember moving forward as you want to manipulate strings and manipulate words for your programs. Okay. Last thing we're going to really look at in strings is what are called string methods. A little bit of just-in-time object orientation. Next, Unit 3, you're going to learn what functions are. And then in Unit 5, you're going to learn what object orientation is. And what you're going to understand about object orientation is it's really putting together your data and your functions. And when you deal with objects, your functions are called methods. I still don't know why, but they're called methods. And basically what they are is when you're creating a string, you're really creating an object. And there are certain pre-written functions or tasks that you can do with these things. And the way we call them is that we just use the variable name, and then we say dot, and then we say, and dot's just a period. A lot of people will say dot something, dot this, something, dot that. And then we'll run a little method or mini program on that particular string. So I listed 3 of them here, and I have the examples over here. The first one is upper, okay? And as you can see over here, it just takes the string and it puts it in uppercase. Now, one thing to remember about this is it's not a permanent change. I can make it permanent and, you know, assign the value of this to another string. But what we're going to learn as we go down and look at lists is strings really can't be changed. In Python, strings are what are called immutable. And what we'll find later is that if I wanted to say reassign my string of 5, it would throw an error because you can't do that. Strings are immutable. You don't change them. That said, if you want to change them, you have the replace method. And what the replace method really does is takes that string, puts it in another temporary variable name, deletes it, and then recreates it using the new information. So this right here, my string replace Spain and France, you can see over here, Spain was replaced with France. Okay, so that's the way you do a quick replace. Again, kind of like the upper, it is not maintained. The only way to maintain changes when you use these methods is to either rename the variable name or save it to a temp variable, delete the old one. You don't have to delete the old one. You really just write over it and then write over it. So that's maybe something you can play around with on the side to get used to that. The third and last method we're going to run is called count. And all that does really is count the substring or character that you give it as many times as it appears in the string. So I did a count of the character n, and if you look here it says 6, and if you count them all, well, we'll do it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There are indeed 6 n's in that. All right, so basically we know we can use the len function to look at how long our strings are, which is useful because you want to do things with indexing and you don't want to go out of bounds. So knowing the length of the string is usually a good thing. You can access different parts of the string, individual characters, by just using indexing, or you can use a slice and create a range. Remember that 5 is the first thing you want, and that 15 is the first thing you don't want. You're going to learn more about that in the second half of this unit when we start using range to do our loops, and you're going to see that the second part of the range or the interval is the first thing that you don't want, okay? Watch out for out-of-bounds errors. You can use math when you do indexing. You can also use variables in there. And it's a good thing, I mean, if you go to the Python documentation, just Google Python documentation and go to the documentation for 3.5 and then search for strings. You'll see all these strings methods are listed. There's upper, there's lower, there's replace, there's a whole bunch of different things you can do with strings, okay? So what I'm going to do is I am now going to zots out that section, and I really don't want that. And I think that'll work. And now we want to look at lists. Let me run this with the list code. Why is it asking me to save it? Doesn't it have a name? String.lists, save, run, and I should be fine. Let me get that up here so you guys can see it. And there we go. Okay, lists. Lists, I believe I say in the slides, are like strings on steroids. But I don't want you to think they're just like strings. They're much, much more powerful. I often say that lists are like bookshelves or storage spaces. When you need to save things, you use a list. You just append it to the list and you can create things. There's two important differences between lists and strings. But the first thing I do here is I just grab a variable, my list, and I make it equal to a list of 4 characters. They happen to be my name. As you can see, I have brackets as the bookends, not braces. I create a list with brackets, and then I just put the characters in there, basically 1-character strings. So in quotes, comma, down the line, so that when I print my list, as you can see over here, it doesn't print it like a string, it prints it like a list. Okay? But similar to strings, as you can see here, I can reference parts of that list by using indexing. So when I go for the second item, remember, we start counting at 0, so that's 0, that's 1, and that's a 2 right there. So when I ask for 2, I want to print an R, and that's what gets printed over there to the left. Okay? Now, these are the two things that make lists different than strings. One is that a list is what's called mutable. You can change it. And you can see this line right here, my list of 2, let's make it equal to a 7. All right? And then let's print it again. And you can see over here, unlike a string, which is immutable and can't be changed like that, lists can be changed on the fly, and I can replace items within the list. Now, there's the other part, which is also here in this example, is you'll notice that's a 7. That's not a character. That's not a word or a string or anything like that. That's an integer, okay? Strings let you hold multiple data types together in the same list. So you can now mix and match your data types and keep everything in one list. You don't have to maintain, like in a string, it's got to be a character. It's got to be, you know, a word. You're not putting numbers and letters in there. You can, but they'll be represented as a string. Here, you can mix and match your data types, and we show that down here. I create a second list, and I give it an integer, a float, a string, another integer, and then, just to show you, I put in the first list. So you can actually put any kind of object in a list. So a list can actually be a list of lists, which is actually how we handle two-dimensional arrays down the line. You're going to learn what that is in the next part of this unit. Okay, so now when I print list 2, you can see down here, it gives me integer, float, string. You can see the string bounded by the single quotes. And then at the end, it just has that list. You know, piece of cake. All right. One last thing about lists that's pretty powerful is you can append from them, you can get rid of items, you can do a whole bunch of things, because lists, just like strings, have methods as well. And like I said, for the strings, it would behoove you to go to the online Python documentation and look up all of the different methods that you have for lists, because they're very powerful and they're very useful. And you're going to see as we move forward in this course, you're going to use lists a lot. As you run through data, as you clean it, as you look for certain aspects of it, you're going to want to say, hey, I found something that I want. You're going to throw it in a list, And you're going to use append to put it at the end of the list. Some people early on think they're clever and they try to use insert, but you don't have to use insert. It's better to use append and just boom, 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 have things stacked on the end. So I show it here. I go to my list of 2 and I append the string one more item to the list. And then when I print it again, as you can see here, the last thing that gets printed is that list again with my list, my integers, my other things. But I also have a string at the end, one more item. So I can add to it. Okay? So at the end of the day, lists are very powerful. You're going to use them a lot, trust me. And back in the old dinosaur days when I went to school, they were called arrays. And in other languages, Java, C, they're usually referred to as arrays. But here in Python, we just call them lists, and we do a bunch of different things with lists. You can see the 2 things that you really have to be aware of is that you can store different types in a list. You're not limited to one kind of data type or another. And also that they are mutable. You can change them item by item on the fly, as we did when we took that character R and we made it a 7. Okay, so remember those 2 things. And I know I beat that down in the slides. You can store different kinds of types in a list, and it's also mutable, so you can change things on the fly, unlike strings, which are immutable. All right, we got one last thing that I'm going to show you. I think this is going to be a decent one time-wise. I don't know. All right, so I want to get rid of that. And that's up there. All right. A couple of semesters ago, a student brought to my attention a little bit of weirdness when it came to the way that strings are handled in Python. So just for an example, I'm going to create a string. Variable name is str4, and it holds a string with 11 characters, and it just says hello world. So now, if I want to print, I can say str4, and I want to grab the last item, so I'll say 10. And let's print that. I'm going to save it. I'm going to run it. And that's all the way down there. I don't want that. I want you to be able to see it. So it just prints the D. Okay? Let me put that over there. Put this over here. So we can get everything all nice and together. All right. So it prints that D. And as you can see, we start counting at 0 and we go all the way to the end. That is the last item of the list. It's a D. So it gets printed, and that's great. Now, as you know, because we just went over it, if I try to print 11, things are going to break because I have now gone out of bounds. And I am asking for the 12th item in an 11-item string, and that is a no-no. But there is a rub here. If I do a range and I say start at 0 and go to 10, I print hello world with the D because that's the first thing I don't want. If I go to 11, I print the whole thing, hello world, because 11 is the first thing I don't want. Now remember, if I've got 11 alone, I break. But if I have 11 as the back end of a range, that's fine, because it's the first thing I don't want, and I'm okay. All right? Now, ready for the weirdness? There's another little piece of weirdness that we're going to go over too. But let's say I go way over range here, and I say 17. What do you think is going to happen? It works. Right? A little weird. And I can be arbitrarily large with this end of the range. And it still works. All right? Little weird, little bit of a Python bugaboo. I think what's going on is that the code in the back end that Python uses just says this is a range. It's not really out of bounds. Just give the person from 0 to the end of the string. Okay? But that's a little weird because you technically you should get it out of bounds, but you don't. It just prints the string. Now, there's another thing we're going to look at, which is reverse indexing. let's say I say string of -1. What do you think we're going to get? I think I reviewed this in the slides. We get the D because when you do reverse indexing, -1 is the end of the string. So -1 is D, -2 would be the L. And let's test that. How about hitting F5? Would that help? Yes. And we get the L. Okay? Now, what if I do, let's say I want to print ORL. Okay? So I'm going to say -1, -2, -3, -4, -4 to -1 because it's the first thing I don't want. Okay, what do you think this is going to give us? It prints the ORL. Okay, so we can use slicing when we do reverse indexing too. But let's say we wanted it in another order, and I wanted to say -1 to -4. You get a blank line. Python doesn't like that. Python doesn't like it when the order isn't from left to right as far as a number line is concerned. It breaks. It says, "Whoa, you don't want to do that. You always want to print going forward. Why are you telling me to do that?" So it's a little weird. So to cut to the chase, I had a student who wanted to print "Hello World," but print it across using reverse indexing. So they said, I want to go from -11 to -1. Okay, so they said, all right, let me try that. They said S and they printed and they got "Hello World." They didn't get the D at the end. So they said, okay, well, let me just put the 0 because the 0 is the first thing I don't want. Logical after what we've learned and what we've been doing. So then when you run that, you get nothing because Python doesn't like it thinks you should be going forward from the 0 and doesn't like the fact that you're looking at that backwards. So the student asked me about it, and I said, A, why would you ever have to do that? But that's not a very good answer when it comes to computer programming. Maybe you do need to use reverse indexing to do blah, blah, blah. The way to get around it, and the way that I told the student to do it, is I'm going to print that part, but then I'm going to use something called concatenation. When you use the plus sign and you do it with strings, boom, it puts the strings together. And in computer science, we call that concatenation. And what I did is I just said, here, we're going to do -1. Okay? Now, when I do it here, it's in a range. So -1 is the first thing I don't want. But here, when it's an individual character, I can reference it. Okay? Because I'm grabbing individual things. And then I just tack it on to the end. So when I do that, all is good in the world. And I get "Hello World" again. Okay? Little bit of weird behavior. A little nuanced, play around with these things, get used to the math, get used to going backwards, get used to going forwards. The backwards, the -1, as far as reverse indexing is concerned, comes in handy. You might just think it's a little trick or something like that, but it actually comes in handy, and it's going to come in handy for you because I know of at least one assignment where it saves you a lot of time to be able to regard a string from the end going backwards. Okay, so I just wanted you to see this. Little bit of weirdness, but we got it handled. Do not make yourself nuts and think you have to type in all this code. I'm going to take stringlist.py. I'm going to put it in your Sakai resources under Unit 2. So you're going to have it to play around with, fool around with it over the weekend, and it can give you a little something extra to think about. Okay? So that's basically it for this video. I'm going to get rid of this. Are we going to do a grand finale? I think we are. Let's get rid of this. So all the code is now highlighted. I'm going to come up here. I'm going to save. I'm going to run it. And there we go. Our first grand finale. Okay, so you have all the things that ran in there. And I'm going to take all of this code and I'm going to put it up on Sakai for you. All right. Okay, announcements. I think things are going pretty well. You guys did a great job as far as Unit 1 is concerned. People got their assignments in. Hans is in the middle of grading them. He has reported no problems. Everything seems to look pretty good. I know programs were kind of easy. There's a lot of you in this class, after having read all your bios, that have a decent amount of programming experience. So the first couple of units you might find a little on the easy side, but remember, go through them, do the work, do the programs, think about it. Because, as I've always said, repetition benefits me greatly. I still learn new things about Python, even at my advanced age. And it's just, it helps because Python does little weird things differently. Arrays or lists. You're going to see when we iterate, we do loops. In the next unit, we always iterate over lists. It's not like setting up a loop in a C++ or a Java. It's a little bit different. Basically, you're always going to go over every item in a list. So it makes iteration really easy. But the hard part is if you want to do something from 1 to 20, you have to learn how to create a range from 1 to 20. So, well, I digress because we should be going over that the next video I do for you. Everything seems to be proceeding well. If you have questions, put them in the forums. Everybody did a good job not putting questions about the quiz in the forum. That was a good job. I got a couple of emails, but they were valid emails, more about format and different things, and not really asking me, how do I do this? Because it's a quiz. I know, it's a one-day open book project, technically. We shouldn't even call it a quiz, but I need you to treat it like a quiz. Don't talk to each other about it. Don't really, ask a bunch of questions because we're not going to be able to answer them, blah, blah, blah. Unit 2 has begun. As you know, you've gotten the slides. You have the Zell ratings, Chapter 5 and Chapter 8, if memory serves. Probably after Unit 1, you're giving yourself a little bit of a break, so you haven't really gotten into it yet, which is fine. I get it. But engage soon because, like I say, learning to program is a paint job. You want to engage with the resources, play around with some exercises, look at these videos. Then you want to do your homework assignments. Then you want to go back and study a little for the quiz. So you have all those different applications, and you learn how to do all of this stuff right. I am likely going to do the second review video over this weekend, and hopefully get that to you Sunday, Monday latest. Also, I'm going to get you an information sheet on the midterm project so you can begin looking at that. Don't get freaked out. I think the due date is November 4th. That said, it'll be on top of us. You know how time goes when the semesters get underway. It's like, oh, got to do this, got to do that, got to do this, got to do that. And all of a sudden, boom, 4 weeks have gone by. So I want you to take that assignment and take your time with it and have fun with it and go through the different resources that we give you to look through and write that paper about. The last thing is that I'll probably get you your assignments either Monday or Tuesday. Like I've always told you, I want to get you all your resources at least a week before the end of the unit. And I think this unit ends Thursday, the first week of October, and that means I want to get you everything by next Thursday. So pretty much a week from now, 6 days from now. So I'll get you all that stuff. I want to front load the resources so you have the option to look at everything on your own timetable. That's one of the neat things about being a hybrid course. Also, be aware, in a couple of weeks, we're going to meet again. I think it's the first Thursday of, I will double check that later and send you some announcement stuff. But yeah, we're going to be meeting in person in another couple of weeks. So keep that in mind, too, and keep that free on the schedule. Other than that, people seem to be chugging along. Hans is doing the assignments. I will be grading the quizzes. I have not done so yet. So if you go there and you see a 5 or a 4 and you're like, what happened? It's because I haven't done them yet. Hopefully I'm going to have some time to do them this weekend. Tomorrow I'm going to the Iowa game because, God forbid, Rutgers doesn't have 3 home games in a row. It's like Groundhog Day. Work, 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 work. Rutgers, NFL. Work, 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 work. Rutgers, NFL. So I've been trying to find time in the evening and time in the mornings and different time to do things. I need to grade your quizzes. Hans needs to finish all your assignments. Then I am going to put all of that together in a grade book, which I don't do on Sakai. I do it myself on a spreadsheet on my machine. And then I will send you individual emails and tell you how you did in Unit 1. Okay? And then at the end of every unit, I'll do an individual email, and you'll see your grades up to that point so that you can plan, you can do things, blah, blah, blah. All right? All right, then I'm going to let you go. You be good, and I will hopefully be talking to you in a couple of days about loops. And then, actually, one last thing. This is the unit where I'm going to get you involved with a site called Project Euler. And it's got a whole bunch of different number theory problems. And a lot of programmers like it because when you're learning a new language, it gives you a whole bunch of problems. Problems are food for computer scientists. You know, it's the lifeblood. You need problems to solve. How should I do this? How should I break this down? How should I do this? And what I'm going to do is we're going to go to Project Euler and we're going to grab a problem, I think number 6, and we're going to break it down and we're going to solve it. Can't do it now, though, because you need loops in order to do it, and you're going to get loops in the next video, and then once you get that, then you're going to be good to go. And that's going to be a nice little moment, because that's when you're going to get to the point where you can start taking what you're learning and actually solve real problems with it. So we're going to go look at that site, and that's cool. And believe me, I said it somewhere else before. After we go over Project Euler, you are never going to want for problems again, because there's a lot of them. Some of them are cool, too. Some of them are hard. All right? So you have a good weekend. I will be in touch soon. Any questions, put them in the forums. Go watch that Slavin TED Talk, because it's really good. And then give me a paragraph or two about how you would relate it to data science, what you thought about it, anything, you know. Just get the conversation started, all right? Then you be good. I'll see you soon. Bye.